I appreciate, I really sincerely do, prayers that are offered on my behalf. And occasionally people will comment to me, hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. And they say it from different angles and different perspectives, and I frequently will mention to the church, to all of us, as a reminder, remember to pray for your leaders. And I'll particularly mention the elders and deacons and the teachers, and I don't ask for the ministers, not to put Craig down, but then occasionally, as in the past, somebody will come up and say, is everything okay? Because they think I'm pleading for a prayer for me, and I am. But in just a general sense, not like my life's falling apart, but I know, like anybody's life, being fragile, and Satan being powerful, that at any given time, life could fall apart. This morning I got a comment, and I dearly appreciated the prayer from someone here that said, I just want you to know I'm still praying that you never burn out. And I paused and I said, thanks, because that is a possibility. And it's an actuality or a realistic possibility for any of us, not just preachers, although this person has known a variety of different preachers and has seen the effects, I guess, of some of them actually burning out. So thinking about the lesson that I had in mind tonight, I thought we'd interestingly turn toward that concept of burning out before we head into it here. Because it can happen to any of us. In Matthew chapter 13, as I was asking you to turn to, in Jesus' parable of the sower, he talks about a couple different soils there that could be equated to the soils that burn out. That's the stony places mentioned in verse 5, and how the ground came up, etc., and the land was scorched, etc. And then verse 7, the thorny soil also. In the parable where Jesus explains that, in verses 18 and following, Jesus talks about the application of those two soils, relating it really to the hearts of individuals. And he says, but he who received the seed on stony places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for only a while. For when tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. And we're all in mind of what that's like, and being fired up and encouraged, and all of a sudden something happens and you lose it. And it is possible to burn out. Or verse 22, or he who receives the seed among the thorns, who hears the word, and the cares of the world or the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful. And out of all that we're looking at here, as we're thinking about our relationship with God, our work with God, our work with the church, our connection with one another that's so vital. We don't want to burn out. We don't want to be like one of these soils that's got it for a while and then all of a sudden it's gone. But it is realistic, and that's why Jesus equates it in his parable here. And I think with a real advisement to us as Christians to understand for ourselves to be on guard, and also to be mindful of other people that might be going through those things, and not just to wash them off saying, oh, well, that's the stony soil, but rather, wow, identify that person. I can see where they're at. They're going to need some help, and so you go over. The neatest thing is about this parable that Jesus is telling is the soil can be changed. You see, soil can even be changed as far as farming goes. You can pull out the rocks, and you can pull out the thorns, and you can add some fertilizer and some good things, and it can change. And so can the lives of people. And thus, I keep on teaching. And thus, we keep on believing, and we keep on trusting, and we waver up and down, don't we, in the midst of our spiritual lives. And the battle sometimes presses very hard against us. And Satan would love to just be able to say, well, that got rid of that. But we're not going to. Paul writes to Timothy, too, talking about this idea of burning out. And as he's talking to Timothy in his second letter to Timothy, he says, I'm greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy. Paul doesn't say what those tears are really about. Some suspect that it might have been when Paul was basically demolished by all these stones and left there, that Timothy was nearby, and that may have been the tearful thing that Paul was relating to. Could have been something that happened on a missionary journey, because Timothy was with Paul in a lot of places. Could have been that Timothy's spiritual life wasn't doing all that well at different times, and he just had a hard time hanging in there. Who knows? But as Paul goes on and talks about these tears, then he refers to Timothy's faith. He says, when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that's in you, kind of tweaking Timothy here, think about that faith. And then he says, which was first in your grandmother, Lois. That's so cool. And then in your mother, he talks about her, Eunice. And I persuaded you also. In other words, I'm persuaded, but it was there, and is it still there? And he goes on and says at verse 6, therefore I remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you. That one by Timothy, laying on of hands. Special spiritual thing. But we have times where the fire is burning and times where the fire needs some stirring up. And Timothy was in that situation. And maybe Paul was reflecting back about either some good times that brought some great tears, or maybe some terrible times, and reminding Timothy about his faith. And he says, we need to be stirring up. So there was something maybe actually missing in Timothy's life. You probably read at least the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation. It gets kind of tedious with all the symbolic language of it and the rest of it. But those first 3 chapters identifying these 7 churches of Asia and describing the different things that God is contending with them about. And one of those, in verses 14 to 22, is a church that's neither hot nor cold. It's lukewarm. You've heard of it. And I wonder if at one time that church was hot, and now it's not. I know that I watch people as they become Christians, and we use the term on fire. And then later in life, maybe just after a few months, it's not the same. And people have come to me and ask, why is it so? Why am I not feeling the same as I felt back then? And we discuss a lot of things, and some of that is reality. Some of it is just sadness and the fact that the fervor that you had has gone away. And maybe we stop and analyze, not often enough, our own personal lives of where the fire is and the potential, of course, burning out. Now there's a neat passage in John, at the end of the Gospel of John, chapter 20, or 21, that I want to kind of zone into here and talk about for just a couple minutes. Could it be apostle overload, or apostle give up, or apostle burnout? I don't know. But I know that somewhere in this process, as John is relating this, the gospel writer, John the apostle, he's talking about something that he himself went through. And he's talking about this situation after Jesus' resurrection, where you'd think everybody should be fired up and excited because here he is. He's proven his great ability and victory over Satan and over the Roman group and everything else. And he's not appeared quite a bit to them yet, the apostles, because as we're seeing it, this is only the 3rd time. But here we read in chapter 21 a very unique occurrence that John's the only one that writes about. Other gospel writers could have wrote about it, but they didn't. But John did, and John was there when this all unfolds. So after these things, after Jesus' proof of resurrection one time, John says, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. In this way he showed himself. Simon Peter, there's one apostle. Thomas, called the twin, number 2. Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, number 3. The sons of Zebedee, 4 and 5. And 2 other of the disciples, 6 and 7, whoever they weren't named, were there together. And Simon, who's always the guy that's outspoken, said to them, I'm going fishing. And I know I've said many times, and even said that I've said many times, that I don't really see this as a, let's go on a spiritual journey and go on a fishing retreat. Peter's occupation was fishing. I'm going back fishing. And I really think, for whatever motives were within him, he was giving up his apostleship. They said to him, we're going with you also. Could cause you to question whether it was really a vast change of occupation going back, or whether they just felt like it was time to be together. But Peter was leading the crowd here by speaking out, and the rest of them, all 7 of them now, are headed off to the sea to do a little fishing. You get away sometimes from things when you really feel like you need to stop and count what's going on in your life. Sometimes it might just be to a kitchen window and you just stop and you just stare outside. Or out in the woods somewhere, and you find a moment or a place to reflect, and you stop and you really think deeply. On occasions, when I'm in the office and I'm looking for something, I'll go outside and I'll just stand and I'll look at the parking lot out there. Now it's all just construction and things going on, but there's something happening and I just kind of get caught up in it. Or other times I'll come in the auditorium and I'll leave the lights off and I'll just stand up here and I'll look out at the audience and I'll envision the people here. And I'm trying to reflect on what's happening here. So here these guys are, they're out there, but they're actually fishing. And I feel like it's apostleship overload or burnout. Well, while they're coming along, as we continue with the story here, it says, verse 4, but the morning had now come, and Jesus stood at the shore. So they've been out at it a while, okay? And yet the disciples did not know it was Jesus. Now, there were times that when he appeared, they didn't recognize him. Some way or another, he was different. The road to Emmaus, one occasion, where he was walking with 2 of the disciples, and they didn't recognize him. However it was. So Jesus is there in verse 5. Jesus says to them, children, that's an interesting thing to come back and think about one day, why he calls them that. But children, have you any food? And they answered him, no. And I asked myself, well, is Jesus acting like he's looking to buy some fish as he's walking along the shore and he sees the fishermen? Do you have anything you'd like to sell? Nope, don't have any food to sell you today. And he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. Now he's gone from questioning to directing. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, that's John now, never talks about himself in first person. He doesn't say, I said to Peter, but he does refer to himself very uniquely as the apostle whom Jesus loved. So he says to Peter, it's the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he removed it, and he plunged into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, about 200 cubits, dragging the net with fish. Then as soon as they came to land, they saw the fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish which you have caught, or just caught. Okay, they're trying to figure out what's going on here. But it's pretty obvious this has happened one other time in their life. Miraculous catch of fish, number 2, is this occasion. Number 1, when it was Jesus called them. And all of a sudden, they knew. Verse 11, Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to the land full of the large fish, 153, and although they were so many, the net was not yet broken. And Jesus said to them, "Come and eat breakfast." Yet none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and he took the bread and he gave it to them, and likewise the fish. Now this is the third time that Jesus showed himself to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And then there's a discussion that goes on after this. He's coming back to these 7 guys. People that have left everything to follow him. And now they come back and they're fishing again in some little boat, as is described here. I don't know if they rented something, how they came up with it, maybe because of the fishing connections. Peter and some of the other guys had that potential of doing it. But there they are. And Jesus comes up. It's like, when I called you, I said, "Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." What are you doing back here? Verse 15, so when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, he's picking on him. Probably knows that he's the one that says, "Let's go fishing," and stirred up this whole change of life thing. So I'm going to come back at you again, Peter. "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" I wrestle with what the "these" is. Is it the fish? Or is he pointing to the rest of the guys he's with? I think it's the fish. That's what they've been focusing on. "Do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Feed my sheep." And he said to him a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah." You think that'd been enough? Maybe some time passed in between, I'm guessing so. Comes back at him again, though. "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Tend my sheep." You ought not to be out here fishing. You've got other work to be doing, is what he's saying over and over. Yes, I know there's a difference between what word the Lord uses in Greek, "do you agape me," and Peter's response, "Yes, I phileo you." Sometimes it can almost be flip-flop back and forth. I don't know if it's a discussion over the intricacies of how much, as much as "do you love me?" and "yes, Lord, you know I'm here." And then he gives him a response. Verse 17, then he says to him a third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" And here Jesus does say phileo. Changes off the agape. Let's just push it aside and let's talk about, how are we? Do you love me? And he said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I loved you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." Now, I skipped over part of this here, because when Jesus in verse 17 asked Simon the third time, John includes something, and maybe he saw it on his face that day as he's watching this. Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time. When you go through burnout, when you're dealing with struggles and you're really feeling beat down, a lot of times it's a time where you're really grieving. You're in anguish over what you know you should be doing and not being able to get up and do it. You know in your heart you've done better. You know you've been stronger. You know at least you felt firmer in your faith, and yet you just can't find it inside you at that moment. And as we're looking at all of this and what's happening here, I think Jesus is telling him it's still attainable, number one. We, I think, from looking at this and so much out of the Bible, we overdo what Christianity is about. And we make it complex. And we make it such a huge burden that we can't carry it. And Jesus, when he comes in and he talks to Peter, and Peter's denied him, he knows that. He's reducing it down to what it needs to be. I've called you to tend sheep. Now, even a fisherman can do that, you see. Do you love me or not? Sometimes when we just don't know where to go and we're just so much beaten down, we can reduce it down to some simple questions like Jesus asked. Do you love God? Well, yes. Okay, then just get up and go at it again. I don't feel worthy. We're not discussing worthy. Do you love God? Yes. Then just try again. Get up. The heart of a follower of Jesus is one that's motivated by what God has done for him. They can't stay down very long because you know deep inside you, you can get up and you've got to move on. And so thus this idea of burning out, it's a great potential and Satan knows it. And he loves to take the crew that does all the work and use it on you. And that's somewhat of what Sunday night's about, the ones that do a lot of the work. It's not the only thing, so don't pat yourself on the back and break an arm there, okay? But it's a possibility. But we don't have to weigh out Christianity as making it such an immense thing that we can't achieve it either. Loving God, taking care of the sheep. Oh, I can handle that. Okay. Let's just go about doing that. And we'll let God lead us in the rest of the way. And that's what's going on here. Now, as we're looking at this, seeing this process, there's a choice to be made. Peter's got to choose again. And then a realization that the work can be done. And God will take care of it. And sheep business is messy. Because it's not really sheep business, it's people business. And that gets messy sometimes. But we, wear what we need to wear, put on what we need to put on, and we charge into the middle of the situation. We do what we can do. And know in the process that we can get it done because God has called us to do it. He's not going to lead us down a path that He's not going to help us on and guide us. Now there's a passage I want you to turn to in Ephesians chapter 5. Again, keeping it simple. Choices to be made. Chapter 5, verse 1. And a rather immense challenge with some simple words. So Paul says, therefore, brethren, considering all the things he's been talking about, I don't have time to grasp the context, but you got my permission to go home and read that. Verse 1, therefore, be imitators of God as dear children. Wow, okay. Not too bad. All I got to do is just be like God. I can handle that. Impossible. But I like what he adds with it. As dear children. Now I know all of you have seen pictures, whether they're set up to be done that way or just because parents have caught them, where kids are inside their mommy or their daddy's shoes and they've got their clothes on, and the little girls are painting the lipstick and the guy's straightening a tie or doing whatever it is, or putting on the work gloves or anything in that whole process to be like daddy or mommy. They're just trying to imitate. because that's what comes natural, to be like that. And so I don't think Paul is giving us an immense thing of, try being like God. I'm working on it. But rather, let's reduce this idea down. Just imitate God. Like little children imitate their parents. Now, it's an immense challenge, but you think about a 3-year-old, they can't outstep their daddy or mommy, but yeah. But their goal is, I'm going to be like them someday. And so that's what our goal should be. Now let's make it even simpler. Verse 2 then, and walk in love. Now it's not always easy to be loving to some of these people that are mean and hateful to you, but basically it's not complicated. And walking, we've all learned to do. Somewhere around 9 months to 1 year, maybe a little more than a year, you learn to walk. And everyone in here, including our beloved Marvel Tinker, even though he's got a cane, is still walking. 95 years at it. And you ask him on Sunday morning, how are you? He said, I'm here. I'm still walking. You see that? That's what God's asking us to do. Walk with Him. Pretty basic in Christianity. With God is the whole idea. We'll stop right here. There's a lot of challenges in this book. They're not complicated. And God enables every one of us to be with Him. So if you feel like you're being burned out, think about it for just a moment. Catch a breath and recognize God's with you. You know you love Him. Just get up and go at it again. And maybe a few years down the road you'll bump into this situation. Now who knows when, but it does come. The thing is, you just keep at it. It's a daily thing that we do. Loving God, walking with Him, and feeding His sheep, as Peter's talked about. If you need prayers at church tonight, just whatever your need might be, we offer an invitation to you. Come, we stand and sing.